There have been a lot of great analyses made about Kiki's delivery service. I think it is one of the few great films where people are aware of a lot of what is being said beneath the surface. I don't know whether to credit the film or the audience more for that. There have been a lot of great analyses made about the film as a depiction of being an artist, being a creative person of any kind, struggling to find a kind of joy and lasting satisfaction in your work, especially after that work becomes commodified. It becomes something you depend upon, and thus it's too easy to lose a personal connection to it. I personally, in this essay, this analysis, I'm going to talk about something related, which is the loneliness of the film. To a certain extent, that's a bit strange, perhaps, because the town into which she comes is rather welcoming. She is a young witch who flies off to the big city to grow up, to have experiences as a more mature person, and be nourished by a larger and broader sense of the world. I think of Lionel Trilling, the great American literary scholar, talking about the young person from the provinces, who is the protagonist of so many great books and films, who comes from a small town with set expectations, set mores, set social standards, and is surrounded by the great city where everything is constantly in motion, where everything is constantly fluctuating. The sensation for Trilling is emblematic of a world that is in a process of flux, in a world where the old standards, the old expectations, the wisdom of bygone days does not necessarily apply. All the old belief systems are more questioned now. Societies over time, especially starting in the 19th century, moved from the country to the city. The city has always been an object of fascination for writers to either praise or loathe. But throughout the vast majority of human history, the city is something mystical and spiritual. It's a place in the same way that a distant country is a place. That is to say, it has a physical value, but it's also a bit unreal and a bit dreamlike. And its primary value is symbolic. Its primary value is emotional and psychological. The vast majority of the population back in this time lived in towns, lived in small villages, lived out in the countryside. But with modernity, with industrialization, people start flocking into the cities. The city goes from a rare place that holds about 5 or 10 or so percent of the total population to holding 30, 40, 50, 60% of the population. It is a fundamental transformation in how people live their lives. And as a result, for Trilling, there emerge all these narratives about young people moving from the countryside into the city, from these places of set expectations, of firm social standards, of cohesive and continuous communities, into a world that is much more in flux, much more in transition. Kiki provides one of the more positive portrayals of such a move. The people she meets in the city are welcoming. They care about her. They're interested in her unique characteristics and what she has to offer. All of this is good, and yet it's not good enough. It leaves her feeling a bit dissatisfied. It leaves her feeling this vague, wistful longing that she does not quite know how to contextualize. Her delivery service is a success. She establishes herself in the community. Despite being young and a bit naive at first, she is not the victim of any crimes. She does not stumble into any dangerous situations for the most part. Everything is as Ghibli cozy as one could want, and yet there is this sense of a loss. The loss of childhood, the loss of a sense of coherence, a sense of who she is, and with that, a sense of easy, organic joy. This is something that the film shares with Whisper of the Heart, another of my favorite Ghibli films. Both portray adolescence itself as a kind of alienation, completely apart from the specific experiences of being an adolescent, of, say, in Whisper of the Heart, going to school, pursuing one's own interests that are now blossoming, navigating the difficulty of crushes, things like that. All those aspects of life matter, but they are secondary to this larger alienation caused by the loss of childhood, by the sense that one is not the person one used to be. That the process of growing up itself causes a kind of loss of certainty, loss of pleasure and delight from behaviors, interests that used to provide joy. There's a sense that those are not sufficient anymore, that the mind and the spirit want more, that they are changing and transforming and becoming aware of the broader world. And as a result, the simpler and more straightforward joys of childhood do not exist anymore. There's this wonderful moment in Whisper of the Heart where Shizuku talks about how she feels like she used to be a nice person and now she's not, and she doesn't know why. I think that's an experience that's common for a lot of tween, early teens. Part of it's just adolescent hormones, but part of it's something a bit deeper, I think. The sense that enjoying life, connecting with others, doing what is pleasant for oneself and for those around one used to be easy, and now it's not. There is a sense of isolation from the easy continuities of life. The self is changing and is no longer connected to those old, strong, reassuring emotions, and thus there's a sense of isolation. There's a sense of alienation. There can be joy, there can be contentment, but it needs to be earned now. It needs to be worked for. It does not simply emerge from the earth and envelop experience, envelop everyday life. Kiki wants to try to connect, but although she is very successful at delighting other people, her service is a major success, it's still a service. It's still something she does for livelihood, for profit. It's practical for her, and thus, as close as the relationships she forms with people are, there's an innate limitation to them. There's a sense of incompleteness. There's a sense of her still not knowing who she is anymore. She has to form that sense of identity, that new concept of herself, through her interaction with her environment. But it's difficult to do that. It's difficult for anyone, whether you're a witch or not. Especially when she's suffering from the loss of the old well springs of pleasure and contentment that she always had as a kid, it seems. She does eventually manage to recapture that pleasure. She saves Tumbo. She's hailed as a hero by the city. And all of this is great. It does establish the sense of reconnection, the sense of finding a clear sense of oneself and a sense of oneself in the world, oneself in a social environment, both of which are very important. But that sense of loneliness still lingers. That sense of vague melancholy. It's a beautiful film, and it's a film where she is able to really connect with people, not just in the commercial world of her little delivery service, but in a true, organic, robust human way. But it's still harder. It still lacks the easy coherence of childhood. This is a necessary bridge to cross, and Kiki crosses it well into being an adult and having to find pleasure for oneself in a more complicated and more uncertain world, to fight for a real sense of identity, both in oneself as a self-contained individual and oneself in a new social fabric. But it's hard. It's harder than it used to be, and there is a sense of melancholy to that, which the film honors quite well. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, if you want to see more videos like this one before anyone else. Keep watching all Studio Ghibli movies. They are absolutely overwhelming with beauty and pathos. Adios, comrades.